The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, as Michael sprinted through the streets of the city. His worn-out sneakers pounded against the hot asphalt, but he barely felt the ground beneath his feet. In his arms, the fragile weight of a baby wrapped in a dirty blanket seemed to weigh a ton. Michael's breathing was erratic, each breath a struggle against the lump in his throat. He knew he couldn't stop. The hospital was just a few blocks away, but every step felt like an eternity. The scene of the accident kept flashing in his mind in disjointed fragments. A car out of control, his mother's scream, the deafening sound of the collision. He remembered waking up among the wreckage, his body aching and his head throbbing. But all of that seemed insignificant compared to the state of the baby. Little Luke, his newborn brother, was unconscious, his eyes closed, and his skin pale. Michael didn't know what to do, but he knew he had to find help, and fast. People around him watched as he ran, but no one stopped him. Maybe they were too busy with their own lives to notice the urgency in the eyes of a 10-year-old boy carrying a baby. Michael couldn't afford to ask for help. All he could think about was the hospital. It was his only hope. When he finally spotted the hospital sign, a wave of relief mixed with panic washed over him. His lungs burned, but he ran even faster, as if his life depended on it. Bursting through the automatic doors of the emergency room, he shouted, his voice hoarse and choked with tears. "Help! Please! Somebody help me!" The nurses turned, shocked by the scene before them. A boy covered in dust, holding an unresponsive baby in his arms, his eyes wide with desperation. At that moment, Michael felt his legs give way. The world around him began to spin, but he still held the baby tightly. He couldn't let him fall. A nurse rushed over, gently taking Luke from his arms. Michael felt an immediate emptiness as his arms became light. He collapsed to the floor, unable to resist the overwhelming fatigue consuming him. As doctors and nurses moved frantically around him, his vision began to blur, and the sound of voices became indistinct, like a nightmare enveloping him. When Michael opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was the bright white fluorescent lights above him. He was lying in a hospital bed, the distant sound of heart monitors beeping in the background. He blinked a few times, confused, until the memory of what had happened hit him like an avalanche. His whole body tensed as he remembered Luke. "The baby! Where's the baby?" he cried, sitting up abruptly. A nurse nearby quickly approached, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Calm down, sweetheart. Your little brother is being treated right now. The doctors are doing everything they can," she said in a soothing voice, but Michael noticed the shadow of worry in her eyes. Dr. Mitchell, a tall, middle-aged man with graying hair, entered the room. His expression was serious, but he radiated a calmness that seemed to comfort those around him. Seeing Michael awake, he walked over to the bed. "You're a brave young man, you know that?" the doctor said with a tense but warm smile. "I'm taking care of your brother. He's in critical condition, but we'll do everything we can to help him." The doctor's words were measured and precise, but Michael felt their weight. He knew what critical condition meant, and it made his heart sink even further. His eyes locked onto the doctor, searching for any sign of hope on his face. Is he going to be okay?" Michael's voice trembled. Dr. Mitchell took a deep breath, kneeling down next to the bed to be at Michael's level. His gaze was soft, but honest. "We're doing the best we can, son, but it's going to be a tough fight. I need you to keep being strong, just like you've been so far." Michael nodded, fighting back tears. He felt small and powerless, but his determination to save his brother was greater than any fear. Dr. Mitchell, sensing the inner strength of this boy, stood up. "I'm going back to the emergency room now. I promise I'll do everything I can." As the doctor left the room, Michael was alone again. The emptiness in the room felt suffocating. He wished his mother were there to hold his hand, to tell him that everything would be okay. But he knew he couldn't count on that. From now on, he had to be strong. Not for himself, but for Luke. As Michael waited, every second stretched into an eternity. The hospital lights cast distorted shadows on the walls, and the oppressive silence was only broken by the occasional hurried footsteps and murmurs of the nurses. He got up from the bed and walked to the door. He needed to know what was happening with Luke. Each thought that crossed his mind filled him with a mix of fear and guilt. Maybe if he had run faster, maybe if he had asked for help along the way. As he opened the door, he was met with an unexpected sight. Dr. Mitchell stood a few feet away, engaged in a serious conversation with another nurse. Michael crept closer, trying to listen in. He caught words like complications and delicate, which made his heart race even faster. When the doctor noticed him, he interrupted the conversation and walked over to him. "Michael, I know you're worried, and you have every right to be, but I need you to stay calm. Your little brother is in a very delicate situation. He went into respiratory arrest when he arrived, and we're doing everything we can to stabilize him," the doctor explained, his face serious but firm. Michael felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. Respiratory arrest? He didn't fully understand what that meant, but he knew it was something bad. His stomach churned with rising fear. Is he going to survive?" he asked, his voice barely audible, trembling with dread. Dr. Mitchell took a deep breath before responding. "It's still too early to say, but we're doing everything in our power. His condition is critical, but sometimes all we need is a small chance. And right now, we have that." The doctor's words were meant to reassure Michael, but all he could focus on was the word, critical. He lowered his gaze, avoiding eye contact with the doctor, feeling the pressure of something much bigger than he could handle. Dr. Mitchell, sensing his anguish, placed a hand on his shoulder. "I know this is a lot for you, Michael, but the strength you showed by bringing your brother here has been incredible. Now, we need to keep fighting for him." Michael didn't respond. He simply nodded his head as the pain and guilt gnawed at his chest. He wandered through the hospital corridors, unsure of where to go or what to do. He wanted to cry, scream, or run to Luke and hold him like he had when he brought him here. But all he could do now was wait, with fear consuming every one of his thoughts. As Michael grappled with his own anguish, Dr. Mitchell retreated to the staff room, feeling the weight of every word he had spoken to the boy. He knew how delicate the line between life and death was, especially for a baby in critical condition like Luke. Every emergency forced him to relive a trauma from his past that still haunted him. Years ago, he had lost a patient, a little girl barely 4 years old. Her condition had been eerily similar to Luke's. She had suffered complications after an accident, and despite all his efforts, he hadn't been able to save her. Since then, every time a child was brought into the hospital in critical condition, the memory of that day resurfaced. The guilt and helplessness had never left him, and he often wondered if he was still capable of handling the pressure that came with such situations. Dr. Mitchell leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes for a moment, trying to push away the shadow of that loss. But the image of the little girl lingered. He remembered her funeral, the devastated family, and how he had felt he could have done more, that he could have been faster, more precise. The emotional scar had never fully healed, and he feared that Luke might become another mark on his conscience. He knew he couldn't let the past control him. Not now. Not with Michael's little brother depending on him. Standing up from the chair, he returned to the emergency room, determined to keep fighting. The team was gathered around the incubator, where Luke was connected to a series of machines. The steady beeping of the monitors was a reminder that time was running out. The head nurse looked at him with an expression of exhaustion but also with a glimmer of expectation. They were waiting for his leadership. He was the one who made the toughest decisions. "Dr. Mitchell, his condition is stabilizing, but it's still too early to make any conclusions," she said quietly. The doctor looked at Luke, so small and fragile, and thought of Michael waiting alone somewhere in the hospital, scared. He knew this wasn't the time for hesitation. Dr. Mitchell took a deep breath, gathered his team, and began outlining the next plan of action. This was no longer just about saving a life. It was about redeeming himself for a mistake in the past. Dr. Mitchell entered the procedure room, where the atmosphere was thick with tension. Everyone knew the baby was teetering on the edge of life and death. Luke, with his tiny lungs struggling to breathe, was surrounded by machines monitoring every beat of his fragile heart. The medical team had already done everything they could, but the situation wasn't improving. Time was running out, and the growing desperation among the staff was palpable. "We need to do something now," one of the nurses said, her voice trembling with the urgency of the moment. Dr. Mitchell knew that the only option left was a risky procedure to try and save the baby. He hesitated briefly, the memory of his past failure flashing through his mind, but he understood that hesitation could cost Luke his life. The decision had to be swift and clear. "We're going to attempt extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, ECMO," he ordered, and the team immediately began preparations. It was a complex and dangerous procedure, especially for a baby so small. Using ECMO meant temporarily taking over the functions of Luke's heart and lungs with a machine, allowing his body to rest and recover. But the chances of success were uncertain. While the team moved quickly, Michael wandered through the hospital halls, unable to sit still. He felt small and powerless, as if everything he knew was falling apart around him. His thoughts kept circling back to Luke, to his mother, to everything that had happened in the last few hours. He blamed himself for not being faster, for not doing more. Silent tears rolled down his cheeks, but he couldn't make a sound. The weight of the silence crushed him. Dr. Mitchell, despite his experience and skill, felt the pressure of the procedure like it was the first of his career. As he monitored Luke's vitals, images of the little girl he couldn't save in the past haunted him, threatening to destabilize him. He could feel those same emotions creeping in, but this time he used them as fuel. He wouldn't lose Luke. Not this time. As the procedure began, complications arose quickly. Luke's already weakened heart went into cardiac arrest, and the piercing sound of the monitors was like an alarm. The room fell silent for a moment that felt like an eternity before everyone sprang into action. "Cardiac arrest!" someone shouted. A cold shiver ran down Dr. Mitchell's spine, but he knew he couldn't give in to panic. With steady hands, he began performing resuscitation maneuvers while the team around him worked to stabilize Luke. Time seemed to slow, and every second became a battle for the baby's life. From a distance, Michael felt like something was wrong. He knew deep down that Luke was in danger. His feet moved instinctively, carrying him back to the corridor where everything was happening. He stopped at the door, watching the chaotic scene inside the room. "Please, God," he whispered under his breath. Inside the operating room, the tense silence was broken by the frantic efforts to revive Luke. Dr. Mitchell's eyes were fixed on the monitors, which displayed a flat line where the baby's heartbeat should have been. He knew time was against him, but he couldn't give up. Not this time. "One more time," he commanded, his voice firm despite the growing panic. The team obeyed, preparing the defibrillator again. Dr. Mitchell positioned the electrodes on Luke's tiny chest and, with a determined gaze, activated the machine. Luke's small body jolted slightly, and everyone in the room held their breath. For a second, nothing happened. The doctor felt a lump form in his throat, on the verge of reliving his worst nightmare. Then, the monitor flickered, and suddenly, a weak heartbeat appeared. The room exhaled in collective relief as Luke's heart began to beat again, feeble but present. Dr. Mitchell took a deep breath, knowing they couldn't celebrate just yet. The fight was far from over. Luke was still critical, and one wrong move could be fatal. From the slightly open door, Michael stood watching. He didn't understand the technical details of what was happening, but he saw the doctors and nurses moving with renewed urgency and precision. He hoped that meant things were improving. His heart tightened with every second, as if his own fate were tied to Luke's. "We're going to stabilize his breathing and closely monitor his vital signs," Dr. Mitchell said, his voice calmer but still tense. The team followed his orders, and slowly, the situation began to stabilize. Luke's heartbeats were irregular, but present. His breathing was improving, though he still required the support of machines. Dr. Mitchell observed every small change in Luke's fragile body. His mind focused, but his heart relieved that he hadn't failed this time. They had passed a crucial moment, but the road to recovery would be long and arduous. The doctor left the operating room and found Michael standing in the hallway. The boy looked at him with red, tired eyes, hoping for any news that could give him some relief. Dr. Mitchell knelt down in front of Michael, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Your little brother is a fighter, Michael. He's made it through the worst, but we still have a long road ahead," the doctor said, his voice firm yet gentle. Michael tried to process the words. He's made it through the worst. That phrase was all he needed to hear. Finally, the weight of exhaustion hit him, and he collapsed to his knees, tears streaming down his face uncontrollably. Dr. Mitchell watched as the boy wept, feeling the immense responsibility he carried on his shoulders. He knew the work wasn't over, but for now, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. The hospital slowly settled into calm after the frantic hours spent trying to save Luke. The baby, still connected to tubes and machines, lay in an incubator, breathing with the help of equipment, but alive. Dr. Mitchell and his team monitored every heartbeat, every assisted breath, while Michael sat by the window, watching his brother through the glass. Michael's eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but he refused to sleep. He had lost so much in such a short time that he feared closing his eyes, only to wake up and find that Luke was gone too. Dr. Mitchell, noticing how tired the boy was, approached him quietly. "You should get some rest, Michael," the doctor suggested, his voice calm and almost fatherly. Michael shook his head, his eyes never leaving Luke. "What if he needs me?" he whispered, his voice laced with fear. Dr. Mitchell understood the feeling. He knew what it was like to carry the weight of responsibility for someone you loved. Sitting down next to Michael, he gazed through the glass at Luke's small, fragile body. "He's stable now. That's already a big victory," the doctor said, trying to offer some comfort. "Sometimes all we can do is wait." Michael looked at the doctor and, for the first time that night, felt like he wasn't alone. There was someone who understood, who cared. He took a deep breath, still fighting the exhaustion, but finally let his eyelids fall slowly. For the first time in hours, he allowed himself to rest, feeling just a little safer, as though the weight of responsibility had been shared for a moment. Dr. Mitchell watched as Michael drifted off to sleep, his head resting against the wall, and a soft wave of compassion swept over him. This child had faced more than most adults ever would. He deserved some relief, a glimmer of hope. The doctor stood quietly and returned to the room where Luke lay. He knew the baby was still not out of danger, but there was something about this family, something about Michael, that made him believe things would be different this time. Hours later, as the sun began to peek over the horizon, a change in Luke's vital signs caught the attention of the team. His heartbeats were stronger, and his breathing was stabilizing. It was a sign small but real. Dr. Mitchell watched the monitors, and a rare smile crossed his face. He knew the battle wasn't over, but the worst had passed. It felt as though the weight of his past mistakes had lifted, if only slightly. He had succeeded. When he returned to the hallway, he found Michael awake, watching anxiously. The doctor approached with a serene expression and knelt down to his level. "Luke is getting better," he said firmly, but with a gentle relief. "It's going to take time before he's completely well, but he's on his way. You brought him here in time, Michael. You saved your brother." The doctor's words took a few seconds to sink in for Michael, but when they finally did, he felt something inside him break. Not out of despair, but out of pure relief. Tears flowed again, but this time, they were tears of gratitude and release. He had done the right thing. He had saved Luke. Dr. Mitchell watched the boy cry, and for the first time in years, he felt a peace that he hadn't experienced in a long time. The past still haunted him, but now, there was something redemptive about what had just happened. He looked toward the sky, where the sun was now shining in soft golden and orange tones, bathing the hospital in a comforting light. It was a new day. Michael walked over to the incubator, feeling a lightness he hadn't felt in a long time. He stared at Luke, still so small but breathing more easily. He knew that there would be more challenges ahead, but for the first time in what seemed like forever, he felt hope. Luke had fought and so had he. With a timid smile, Michael stepped away from the glass and sat down, watching the sunrise with a sense of renewal. "We made it," he whispered to himself. and in that moment, everything felt lighter. Dr. Mitchell gave one last glance at the brothers before stepping out of the room. He knew Luke's recovery would be long, but something was different this time. For the first time in years, he felt like he could leave the past behind. He had saved Luke, and in a way, he had also saved himself.